Who is my neighbor? Asks the lawyer, who's trying to be just, of Jesus. It's a profound question because the lawyer and Jesus have agreed that the ultimate law of God is to love your neighbor as yourself. Think of what a radical command that is, to have all the feelings of self-regard, of charity, of commitment and obligation that you have for yourself, for your own family, for your neighbor. Jesus says, in fact, to follow me is to hate your family, to hate your father and mother and brother and sister. It's a jarring claim that Jesus makes very clearly. And to understand what he means by this claim, that to follow him is to hate your family, you have to put it in the context of these conversations about where your moral obligations lie. Because Jesus is saying that to love all of humanity is a rule that transcends the individual, the specific obligations that you have as an individual in a family and in a community. Jesus comes into a world where family solidarity is fundamental. And he says these kinds of solidarity, these kinds of communities of obligation, like the family, which is extraordinarily strong in his world, the commitments between children and their parents, between brothers and sisters, even between cousins and members of the clan, are considered fundamental. And so when Jesus says to follow me means to hate your family, it means that the way that I conceive of your obligations to love your neighbor so fundamentally transcend all other kinds of commitments that you have to be willing to set them completely aside and view all human beings as your neighbor. Compare that to the Stoic ideas of humanity and duty and what it means to be at the center of a concentric ring. The Stoic idea leaves some fundamental place for communities of justice, for communities of obligation. This discussion between Jesus and the lawyer, who is my neighbor, sets up absolutely fundamental questions about the nature of justice and what we owe to others. Let's think about the commands that Jesus is implying in his answer to the question, who is my neighbor? Imagine yourself. If you are walking down a street and you see someone who has been beaten up on the side of the road and there's no one else around, are you obligated to help them? I think most people would answer yes, whether or not that's what you would actually do, whether you would pretend not to see them, like you probably do homeless people who are all around us, that's a different answer. But what you would say is that you do have some moral obligation to help. Imagine that it's your brother or sister there on the side of the road beaten up. Would you help them? Of course you would. Imagine that it's a complete stranger, though. Would you help them? Still, you would say you have this obligation. Now, that's a scenario that Jesus creates in which you're walking down a road and you happen to see someone who is in need of your love, in need of your aid. Now imagine a scenario in which you don't see this happen, but in fact, you read about it in a newspaper. That's a different scenario. But is it a morally different equation? Do you still owe aid if you don't physically see them? What if, in fact, they are not simply on the road, but they are somewhere across the state? Or what if they are, in fact, halfway across the globe? What if they haven't been beaten by robbers, but are in some other form of desperation? In other words, we can look at this parable of Jesus and begin to ask more fundamental and profound questions that should influence the way we think about justice even in our own world. Is it specifically something about seeing that entails moral obligations? Is it something specifically about being beaten by robbers? Or is Jesus saying, rather, that the nature of justice is to treat all human beings with the kind of love and aid that the Samaritan shows to the man on the side of the road, regardless of whether or not we're part of the same community as the people in need? And what does that mean for us in the modern world.